for this morning, Ted Hanley. Now, Ted is going to be talking to us about the corporal works of mercy. And on my way over here in the car this morning, I was trying to remember the corporal works of mercy. And I said, now there are 5. There are not 5, there are 7. Can you remember them? I've got about 5, I think. I had 3, and Ted has added another 2, and the one at the end he will explain to you, but there are 7. So for those of you with a good memory, you'll be able to just rattle them off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can't, but I'm working on it. I used to think I was awfully clever and I can remember the whole lot. You know, the commandments and the precepts of the church, 7 of those, the corporal works of mercy, and there are other things that we remembered from our childhood, which I learnt at, as someone said to me once, at my mother's knee or some other low joint. I'm not quite sure. But I thought I remembered them all, and I don't. So I will be listening very keenly to what Ted has to say. Ted Hanley comes to us, excuse me, from Galveston in Texas. And you might remember the great song that was such a hit on the radio, Galveston, Galveston. Well, this man is from Galveston, which I understand is a port town, very famous for a number of things which I no longer remember, but will be reminded about over the weekend. And Ted is the executive director of the Jesse Tree, about which you may know something and read about it from time to time. Probably better known in the United States and other part of the English-speaking world than it is here. But I am delighted to have him as a speaker this morning, and I know that you'll enjoy his company as much as I will. Would you please make him welcome? Ted Hanley.
Good morning. Beautiful day. This is my second opportunity to speak in New Zealand. I was here for a Divine Mercy conference and have just fallen in love with your beautiful country, beautiful climate, beautiful people. Great place to visit. Thank you so much. The corporal works of mercy are incredibly important to all of us. And they are so important that we read in the scriptures that by our works we will be judged. And what could be more important than that? The works that we perform will be the mirror held up at the end for us to take a look at what did we do with the 2 hands, the 2 feet, the good minds that God gave us to survive our way through this world. So by these works we will be judged, but that isn't a threat by any stretch. It is an invitation. And the invitation is that it is a privilege to perform works of mercy. It is a great privilege indeed, and rather than shrink or find excuses why we can't do them, we should be starting every day wondering what store of riches lies ahead in the day by way of works of mercy. We are gathered at a Eucharistic conference, and what an incredible way to come together to remind ourselves of the greatest gift of our faith. The Eucharist, the living presence of Christ in our lives, is available to us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in every tabernacle in the world. And we as Catholic Christians truly believe, or we strive to truly believe, in the absolute presence of our Lord in the Eucharist. We have a great gift, and yet, as human beings, we take things for granted, even a great gift like the Eucharist. So it's a great privilege to come together once a year for a Eucharistic conference to remind one another and to celebrate and to learn some new facts that we should know about the Eucharist and what it means in our lives. Last night, at the elevation of the Eucharist, somebody's cell phone rang. And I thought, what a perfect way to start this weekend to remind us that we need to leave the world out. We need to retreat. We need to gather, and we need to let go of the cell phones, let go of the internet, let go of the television, let go of all of those other things to really focus on what is most important in our lives, and that is spiritual growth, direction, and where we're really headed. I have listened to enough sermons and enough talks in this world to know that you're only probably going to hear the first 15 minutes of what I need to say. And so I want to get that in fast. I'm going to give you a little tour of Galveston. I brought a videotape to show you works of mercy that are happening there. But the real crux of my invitation to you today is please go forth from this conference with a new way of analyzing your community. When you look to find where works of mercy are being performed, I want you to look for a level of professionalism, a level of sophistication, and a level of efficiency that you would demand from your bank, from your university, from your medical professionals, from your dentist. When choosing spiritual direction, many of us are completely lost. There are no yellow pages. We don't have a big, thick guide to give us the opportunity to analyze and find the qualifications and the sophistication of the type of spiritual direction that we want. We often relegate that to neighbors, friends, untrained people, where we share intimate details about our own spiritual lives and direction without a second thought about the professionalism and the kind of quality that we really need to apply to that part of our lives. Remember one time my mother said to me, you know, in the States there were children dying, being left in hot cars where they would suffocate in the sun. And my mother said, you know, the same person who would leave a child in the car wouldn't think to leave their purse sitting there. If everybody treated a child the way they treat their purse or a wallet, children would be the best protected beings in the world. She had a great point. She also said to me, I've been watching these talk shows, and she said, don't go pointing fingers at me about dysfunctional families. Adam and Eve had the first dysfunctional family, and their children killed one another. So we've made progress. A lot of good common sense that we need to remember. The corporal works of mercy are to feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, to clothe the naked, to shelter the homeless, to comfort the imprisoned, to visit the sick, and to bury the dead. The works of mercy may sound to you like something that a religious order ought to be embarking on, taking a mission to some foreign country, but the truth of the matter is God knows us so well that God selected 7 things that every single one of us could do every single day of our lives. They are so mundane, they are so common, they are so ordinary, and on their own, all they are is survival skills. Every one of us has to eat today. Every one of us has to drink. Every one of us has to have shelter. Without it, we're going to get sick, we're going to die. And in His mercy, God gave us all those very simple things and said, with the proper disposition of your heart, those very common things become works of mercy. The whole concept of the Eucharist is about change. We believe that simple bread and simple wine are changed and become the body and blood of our Lord Jesus Christ. In works of mercy, we believe that if we honor God by loving in our hearts and in our souls as we offer that food or that drink or that clothing, we elevate it from a simple act of survival to a communion with another human being that is graced as a work of mercy. How do we do it? We do it through prayer. We do it through learning. But you often hear the expression, practice works of mercy. It's like practicing the piano. You practice. Practice makes perfect. And so you practice every day, and you pray for the grace to know of new opportunities to truly transform something that could be just a fast food meal into a work of mercy. And I say that because there is no pretense about this, in that if you cannot practice a work of mercy toward yourself or toward the people with whom you are living, you cannot fool yourself into thinking that you can go out into the world and provide a work of mercy. It can't be done. Under our own roofs, we have the opportunity every single day, instead of being frustrated that kids are going to run in the door, gobble up what you've eaten, and run out the back door, to pray while preparing that food and to ask God to bless the souls of those people who are going to eat without a second word the food that you've worked so hard to prepare, and to ask Him to make that not a meal, but to make that a communion. I have 5 children, and they are 6 years apart, and you can imagine how many times we were tugged at the knee and asked for a drink of water. And it does not come from within me to understand an opportunity for a work of mercy. It is strictly the grace of God. And I was fortunate enough when I was in graduate school and still quite young to have been introduced to the devotion to the Divine Mercy. And Saint Faustina Kowalska has left us a diary and a legacy that chronicles the mercy of God, and in every place you turn in that diary, our Lord emphasizes to Faustina, never shrink or absolve yourself from performing a work of mercy. You can always do something. And in telling her that, he was very clear to say that the order in which we are to regard works of mercy is deed first. Roll up your sleeves and reach out and perform that work of mercy. If you cannot reach out and actually perform that deed of mercy, then you do so in prayer. And it's very important for us to understand that we must get physically involved in performing corporal works of mercy. My own life changed radically in being introduced to the devotion to the Divine Mercy. And I think many of us fail to understand that the actions of every day can be as prayerful as the words that we say when we gather to pray. If we ask that those actions be blessed and be prayerful. And in having 5 children, all of whom were coming through the back door asking for a drink of water, rather than letting that be a frustration, to choose that as an opportunity to fill the glass of water and to get down and to be able to look that child in the eyes and to myself say the chaplet of Divine Mercy and just ask that child, has anyone told you today that they love you? And to see the delight in a child's face, they say yes or no, you can say I love you anyway. And to take that time to really imprint on that child a work of mercy that could have been just a glass of water. As a young professional, I worked as an architect, and I parked my car one day. I had not lived in a city the size of Houston. It's a huge metroplex, And at that time, there were 18,000 homeless people living in the city. That was more people than lived in the town I was born in, and it was very hard for me to even fathom that many people living without homes. It didn't take too long in being past some of the people on the street to see that they were chronically mentally ill, chronically alcoholic, chronically drug addicted, people who had slipped between the cracks, and no one knew who they were, where they had come from, or where they were going to go. And as a young person, like most of us, I just assumed there was somebody out there feeding them, there was somebody out there sheltering them, there was somebody out there caring for them. Well, I knew that because we threw money in the basket every week. And every year, my mother put a cardboard box in the hall and said, put your old clothes in the box because we have the bishop's relief and we're going to give our clothing to the poor. So I knew somebody was out there taking care of these people. But as a young professional, walking past all of these people, I said to myself, wait a second, something here in the system is not working because these people certainly look as if they're in need. And I know it's frightening when you are not trained, you don't understand mental illness, you don't understand addiction, and you see someone in that condition. And God was good to me because one of the first people that I truly noticed as an individual was a very elderly woman. And I noticed that she was wearing a beautiful mohair jacket. My mother's family is from Ireland. I recognized it as an expensive article of clothing, and yet it was so out of place in Houston, Texas, where it's 95 degrees and blistering hot in the summertime. And this poor woman was sitting and talking to herself, making no sense. She had bags around her feet and a terrible odor. And I wondered, as I walked to my office, I thought, where in the world did she get that jacket? And at noon, I was busy working on a project, so I didn't go out for lunch. And I took a break, and I was eating an apple, and I walked by the window. I was up on the 7th floor of an office building, and I looked down, and the courthouse was right across the street. Very busy place at noon in a big city. And the little woman had moved, and she was now sitting on a bench just outside the main entrance of the courthouse where hundreds of people were coming and going. But from up above, it was as if someone had put a jar over her. There was a space around her because people very politely walked around her, and I could almost hear their mother saying to them, don't stare, don't look at her, and they walked around, and it wasn't until they were well past her that they glanced back to take a look at her. And I had done a study at the University of Texas at Austin about the interaction between newborns with their mothers and blind newborns who couldn't make eye contact and were therefore not stimulated to nurse properly, and how very difficult it was to get that unsighted newborn to take nurturing and to actually develop. And I looked at this little woman and I thought, we've made her blind. We don't look at her, we don't walk near her, we have relegated her to a space and we've said, you're on your own. And I put the apple down, and I went down, and believe me, that smell barrier was incredibly difficult to overcome. And I sat down next to her, and I said, my name is Ted, what's your name? And she babbled. She made no sense. She talked and talked and talked, and nothing made any sense. And she reached for a purse, and she took papers out, and she folded them and unfolded them and handed them to me. And I began to notice that every paper that she took out of the purse had some address in Connecticut. Connecticut is 2,000 miles from Houston, Texas. And I thought to myself, where did this person come from? And I gathered what information I could from these papers by way of name and cities and whatever. And I said goodbye to her, went back up to my office, and I made a couple of phone calls to Connecticut. And within 3 or 4 phone calls, I discovered that she was 83, and that at the age of 80, she had wandered out of an Alzheimer's unit in a very nice rest home. Her family, the police, the entire community had dragged rivers, combed woods, searched high and low, and had presumed her dead for 3 years. And she was sitting on a park bench in the sweltering heat, wearing her beautiful mohair jacket in the middle of Houston, Texas. The blessing that really came from that was a really profound understanding that there are no masses out there. Every group of human beings is composed of individuals who come from somewhere, belong to someone, and need someone else to sit down and say hello. And I look back and I think how kind God really was to give me the gentle opportunity to, one by one, learn that when we assume that someone is out there feeding the hungry and sheltering the homeless and clothing the naked, we may be wrong. We just may have to do it ourselves. A story that I don't like to tell on myself because it's embarrassing happened right about that same period of time. Houston is generally very hot, but we occasionally will get a freeze. And after this experience, I started visiting shelters and soup kitchens, and I found them to be filthy. I found them to be very undignified. I found them to be very threatening, very frightening. I became more and more concerned about who is taking care of the poor and what is happening. And the people in my office thought as long as they knew somebody who was going down there, they'd bring clothes, they'd bring bag lunches. So they started bringing things to my desk, and I ended up with a car full of things. And I worked late one night in January. It was freezing cold, and even ice on the sidewalk, which is unusual in Texas. And when I came out of my office, there was a young man, and he was in cut-off denim shorts, no shirt, no shoes, and he was standing in the vestibule, and he was just trying to stay warm, and he was moving his feet because of the ice on the sidewalk. And my first thought was, this must be some kind of a practical joke or something, or a stunt for a fraternity. And I kind of laughed, and I said to him, "What are you doing?" And he said, "They just let me out of jail. And I was arrested back in the summer, and this is what I was wearing, and this is how they released me." And I said to him, "You've got to be kidding me." I said, "They don't give you clothing?" And he looked at me and he said, "Have you ever been to jail?" I said, "No." I said, "Well," I said, "you just happen to run into the right person because I have a car full of clothing right around the corner." And he said, "You're kidding me." He went around the corner and he just pulled anything on to get warm. And I realized I didn't have any shoes, didn't have any socks. And I thought to myself, now, gee, that's really too bad because it's late. I worked overtime, and the Salvation Army stores are all closed, and all the thrift stores are closed, and there's no place to get this guy a pair of shoes. And the embarrassment that I had to acknowledge to myself was I had a wallet in my back pocket with every credit card you can get. Didn't even think about the mall, the shopping center. I thought this guy should get shoes from a second-hand place. Why? Because that's what I knew. I was embarrassed to think that I couldn't say to this guy, "Let's get in the car and go to the shoe store." What it made me own was the fact that I was 24 years old at the time. And at 24 years old, every year, my mother had put that cardboard box in the hall, and I had lied to myself. I had told myself I was giving clothing to the poor. I was simply getting rid of what I didn't want. I gave what didn't fit me. I gave what I didn't like. I gave what I didn't need. And at 24 years old, it was the first opportunity for me to truly practice a work of mercy and say, this is the first time I will actually give an article of clothing to a poor person. It's very difficult to get that honest with yourself. It's very embarrassing when we have to stop and say, I have really lied to myself and I bought it. But the blessings that follow that are so immeasurable that it's worth every rotten feeling of being honest with ourselves. Our Lord told Faustina over and over again, you do what you can do, I will make up for what you lack. And the number of times that I have seen that happen is so incredible and so profound that it makes me want to know more about works of mercy. I have a short videotape, and we'll start that now and give you a trip to Galveston, Texas. The Jesse Tree began in 1995 when a group of concerned individuals gathered to discuss the fragmentation of services and the dwindling resources available to help those in need. That group included ministers, social service providers, and medical professionals. As a result of that think tank, it was determined that if the community had one reliable source of information, it could direct people to assistance, and better yet, it could teach people to locate their own resources. To accomplish this goal, the Galveston Safety Net was developed as Galveston County's first social service website. To provide broad access to this information, and knowing that not everyone had access to a computer, the information was downloaded and printed at our local newspaper in an inexpensive tabloid called the Jesse Tree Journal. To expand options for those who do not read and for those who do not speak English, we added a third project called the Bilingual Telephone Helpline.
Hola, ¿cómo está ahora, señora?
As many as 300 calls are received each day requesting information and assistance in Spanish and in English. In 2001, nearly 78,000 phone calls were received on the Bilingual Telephone Helpline. The Jesse Tree plays a unique role in locating and coordinating assistance for those in need. Recently, the Hudson Institute in Washington, D.C. released a study describing the role of organizations they call faith-based intermediaries. This describes the role of the Jesse Tree in Galveston. As an intermediary, the Jesse Tree magnifies the function of a clearinghouse and takes it to a more sophisticated level, managing information, resources, both financial and material, and integrating the delivery of social services, medical care, and ministerial support. The Jesse Tree has developed WebCare, a web-enabled universal application that creates a database of applicants to integrate services and creates a vehicle for community case management. The following diagram helps to illustrate how the Jesse Tree integrates care in our community. Before the Jesse Tree, there were 4 distinct arenas in which individuals and families sought assistance. The social service agencies, funded in part by state and federal dollars, the medical providers, the faith-based ministries, and an array of community-based services. Using a common-sense approach, the Jesse Tree begins by assessing individuals and families for eligibility in the social service arena. While looking for resources there, they are also assessed for connection in the medical arena. Individuals are referred for primary care, assessed for connection to qualified Medicare beneficiary programs, Medicare, Medicaid, and disease management programs. Then the Jesse Tree turns to the network of faith-based ministries to fill gaps and to augment the resources that have been garnered in the other two arenas. Finally, to create holistic referrals, we turn to the community where support groups, education, job placement, and many other services are available, and make referrals so that individuals and families are sustained and supported beyond the initial referrals. Using WebCare, a database is accumulated so that when individuals return, we don't have to begin with a new application. We simply turn to the database and pick up where we left off. The Jesse Tree responds to requests for assistance with a holistic approach regarding the spiritual needs of the individual as equally important as the physical and mental needs.
I'm Charles Milliken, the senior pastor of the Moody Memorial First United Methodist Church in Galveston, Texas. One of the things that I'm really most proud of because of the coalition and because of Jesse Tree is that we really are a community. When you think of the word community, you think of common unity, and that's exactly what we've become. All of us are a part of a faith-based understanding of how we understand God. We come from a variety of directions, but as a community of faith with the coalition, we're able to do things together that we could have never, ever done separately. And so consequently, the real person, the whole person, can be dealt with in a way that's got a lot of dignity. It's got everything that would go in what we understand as our understanding of faith that binds us all together and pulls us together in a great, great way.
The Jesse Tree has received national attention, recognized as a faith-based intermediary, and has been involved in the Community Action Program through the Bureau of Primary Health Care. In addition to serving as a faith-based intermediary, the Jesse Tree also fills gaps in the continuum of community care. Under the expanding umbrella of the Jesse Tree, projects like congregational nursing have developed to train local nurses to bring health information to their individual congregations and to seek assistance using computer terminals that link them to the Jesse Tree's website and to WebCare. The overall goal of this project is to reduce the disparity in health care that many communities are experiencing. The Health Equipment Loan Program collects used, durable medical equipment and provides hospital beds, wheelchairs, and other equipment to the uninsured. This project provided a return on the use of used equipment that exceeded $300,000 in the first 2 years of service. The Jesse Tree was approved for 12 volunteers in Service to America, or VISTA workers, who coordinate and develop projects that improve the continuum of care in Galveston. Current VISTA projects include pharmaceutical assistance programs, nutrition for wellness, coordination of services for senior citizens, care of the homeless, breast cancer, and financial medical screening. In addition, senior citizens employed by the Galveston County Senior AIDS Program assist at the Jesse Tree. The Jesse Tree assists the Galveston Beach Patrol by coordinating translation and interpretation, ministerial support, and providing compassion kits of ice, juice, water, and food for families who have lost a loved one to drowning. Families are supported in their grief and given guidance to find accommodations and to make arrangements when the body of their loved one is found. At the end of each week, a true symbol of the integration of services in Galveston is the Friday Food Fair. In the first year and a half, over $1 million of fruit and produce was distributed, while over 7,000 individuals came and were provided with social services and medical information, legal aid, and applications for medical care and food stamps. These individuals represented over 30,000 family members who benefited not only from the food, but from the connections with improved services. The farmers market setting adds dignity and promotes community spirit. Galveston has entered into a new era of good stewardship and love of neighbor. Galveston has grown the Jesse Tree. The Jesse Tree has received national attention as a faith-based intermediary organization and is participating in the Community Access Program, or CAP grant, through the Bureau of Primary Health Care in Washington, D.C. The Jesse Tree needs your help, your support, and your prayers. If you or your organization is interested in learning more about the Jesse Tree, please find our website at www.jessetree.net or contact us with the following information. I can't tell you the joy at seeing the multiplication of works of mercy that I have been privileged to witness since those first few bag lunches and used clothes that were in the back of my car. But I don't take credit for it either, because it is not my work, it is the Lord's work. It is my privilege to serve and to have guided and prayed for the guidance that He would use my skills and my talents to do something for the less fortunate in my community. The ironic part about it is, I think in the process of learning works of mercy, ultimately it does bring us to learning that we must also be merciful to ourselves. I worked for 10 years for a healthcare corporation, and in the States, if you do not have health insurance, you are at the mercy of the system, and there is no help if you don't have insurance. And after 42 years of taking health insurance for granted because I just thought everybody had it, I left my job with that healthcare corporation to start the Jesse Tree, and they terminated my health insurance without telling me. My wife is very smart, and she went right out and she found a private policy, and what they wanted was $6,000 down, $3,000 in addition to that, because it was $1,000 a month premium, and there was a 30-day waiting period before it became effective. And for 30 days we were uninsured, and the week before the policy was implemented, our oldest child ended up in pediatric intensive care, and we went $50,000 in debt overnight. The biggest shock and the fright was the concern in seeing my child on a stretcher and fearing that because we were uninsured, that doctors would not do the proper tests, that he would not receive the proper medical care, and that we would lose our child. And the fear as a parent, you cannot describe. And I look back because a doctor from India stepped in and said to me, I have seen the work you have done in our community, and I promise you that your child will not want for anything. And I know that that was how God thanked me for the little part that I did in bringing works of mercy to our community. And our child did receive the best quality care, and he is fine, recovered fully. But I left a different person, because any person who comes to the door of the Jesse Tree, I know exactly how it feels. And I also know that the poor have been relegated to a system that does not offer sophisticated, quality care. And my commitment was more than redoubled in reviewing the works of mercy and saying, when a person is in need, we should, as Catholic Christians, we should demand that the system that we have to respond to their needs is more professional, more sophisticated, more effective, more efficient than the most efficient system in our culture. Because by these works, we shall be judged. And the real truth of the matter is, most people want that. It just takes an awful lot of courage to step out and say it, a little more courage to step out and do it. And I have truly come to believe that we do not live in a world of people who don't care, but we live in a world of people who want to see that what they do is going to make a difference. The Jesse Tree has adapted the internet. We have raised the level of sophistication so that a person can enter from any church ministry, any medical provider, any social service agency, and can get that quality care. In your country, many works of mercy have been relegated to the government. They are blessed. They are doing the work that our Lord asked us to do: feeding the hungry, sheltering the homeless, caring for the poor. They are blessed. How can you be their partner? How can we then elevate that and attend to their spiritual needs? You are never too young, you are never too old to perform works of mercy. We had a situation where a young, chronically addicted mother decided to go to the store. She was a teenager herself, addicted to drugs, put her baby in a closet and left, met some friends at the store. They gave her some drugs. 3 days later, she woke up and realized that she had forgotten her baby in the closet. She ran back, got the baby, and brought the baby into us. And having had 5 children and loving babies, it was shocking to see the baby when she lifted the blanket. The baby was 8 months old and weighed less than 8 pounds. Our children were all over 8 pounds when they were born. It was so heartbreaking, and I looked at her and this young thing who needed to be cared for herself, and I said to her, "Your baby needs a doctor. You need a doctor." We had a pediatrician right next door, and so I just took the baby and went next door with her, and she had pneumonia. She had infections in both ears. She was so underweight. And he said to me, he looked and he said, "The chances of this baby living are so slim that," he said, "I could admit her to the hospital, but," he said, "they would put her on life support. She would be isolated." And he said, "I think it would be kinder for someone to be holding her when she dies." And he said, "You and Ellie have cared for other children." And he said, "If you think that you can take care of her, I will give her prescriptions, but I will tell you that it is highly probable that she will die." I called Ellie and prepared her, and I brought the baby home. And my oldest son was 10 years old at the time. And he was coming down the stairs as I came in the front door. And he said, "Oh," he said, "Mama told me you were bringing a baby home. Can I see her?" And I said, "Sure." And I lifted the blanket, and a look of horror came over his face. And he said, "What's wrong with her?" So I told him, and he said, "Can I hold her?" And I said, "Sure." And he sat on the couch, and he held her. And our next child came in, and she said, "Oh," she said, "the new baby's here. Can I hold her?" And my son looked, and he said, "No, she's comfortable. I don't think she should be disturbed." He bonded with that child, and he held that child, and he did not go out to play. He did not touch the computer. And I have told him that he saved her life. His loving look into her eyes invited her back into this world. She had nothing to live for prior to that. And the nice part about that, she lived with us for almost a year, learned to walk, and started to talk. And her aunt, who was much older than her mother, came on the scene and adopted her and brought her back to the family. The simplest children can see the need for works of mercy and can perform them if given the opportunity. We have a friend who's 101 years old, And Mary does not miss Mass on Sunday and does not miss an opportunity to perform a work of mercy in our community. So when God gave us the corporal works of mercy, he gave us a great gift, a great invitation, an opportunity, young or old, to perform works on which we will be judged. Thank you.